The mockery of Earth. The Galactic Empire had seen 1,000 species rise and fall. It had crushed rebellion, tamed lawless sectors, and expanded across the stars without challenge. Its fleets, vast, invincible, and laden with technology perfected over millennia, were the arbiters of civilization. So when the Empire first encountered Earth, it did not consider the fledgling species a threat. Sitting in his throne-like chair aboard the Imperial war station Eclipser Prime, Grand Strategist Valcairn watched the live holographic feed of Earth's first presentation to the galactic community. The primitive species, calling themselves humans, had unveiled their prototype warships with what Valcairn could only assume was earnest naivety. In the vast Imperial Senate chambers, laughter erupted. "These things are their best warships?" scoffed Lord Admiral Vorix, a towering, six-limbed reptilian from the conquering race of the Ketheri. His yellow eyes gleamed with amusement as he studied the crude, metallic ships displayed on the holoscreens. "I've seen pirate skiffs with better hull plating." Valcairn sneered, flicking his fingers across the control panel to magnify the display. The human vessels were laughably small, with angular frames, no visible energy weaponry, and what appeared to be primitive ballistic turrets. Their engines lacked the standard hyperdrive signatures of advanced civilizations, and they relied on kinetic weaponry instead of plasma or particle cannons, an archaic choice the Empire had abandoned centuries ago. "This is what they believe can stand against us," Valcairn mused, his voice dripping with condescension. A collection of rusted coffins? Across the Senate chambers, the unified mockery of Earth continued. Some senators called for the species to be subjugated immediately, their technology seized for study before it could develop into a genuine nuisance. Others, finding the entire affair beneath their concern, suggested ignoring the humans altogether. After all, a species that still relied on metals and bullets in space combat was no species worth conquering. The only human representative present, a young diplomat named Ambassador Ryan Carter, kept his face impassive despite the laughter. He stood alone in the vast chamber, surrounded by species that had conquered and enslaved entire worlds. When the mocking subsided, Carter finally spoke. "We understand that you view us as primitive," he said, voice calm. "But we urge you to reconsider. Our ships are built for an entirely different style of warfare. You assume our weapons are weak because they do not function like yours. That is a mistake." The room was silent for a brief moment, before Admiral Vorix let out a booming, guttural laugh. "A mistake," he bellowed, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Little human, do you know how many worlds the Empire has ground into dust? Your kind is fortunate we do not consider you worth the effort." More laughter, more jeering. Carter clenched his jaw. Then, the Imperial Senate cast their judgment. Earth would receive no formal recognition, no diplomatic relations, and no respect. They were insignificant, irrelevant, and unworthy of even an official conquest. But to ensure that humanity understood its place, the Senate approved a punitive demonstration. A single fleet of 5 Imperial dreadnoughts would be sent to Earth's solar system. Not to conquer, not to negotiate, just to remind them who ruled the stars. The arrival of the Imperial fleet. 1 week later, the Imperial 7th Armored Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system. 5 colossal dreadnought-class warships, each one capable of leveling an entire planet, loomed over Pluto's orbit. At their head was the flagship, Dominion's Wrath, commanded by Lord Admiral Tarek, a ruthless strategist who had reduced 5 civilizations to ashes in his time. He had no illusions about this mission. It was a farce, a spectacle of power to terrify a lesser species into submission. "This will be over in an hour," Tarek muttered as his fleet powered their weapon systems. "Let's show these savages what real warships look like." On Earth, the United Nations Space Command scrambled to respond. Every available warship, 50 in total, a fraction of the Empire's force, moved to intercept the invaders at the Mars defensive perimeter. It was a suicide mission. Earth's prototype ships stood no chance against the Empire's dreadnoughts. Everyone knew it. And yet, as the final human vessel deployed from its secret facility, an AI voice echoed, through classified military channels. Nemesis is online, and for the first time, the Empire had no idea what was coming. First strike and the unveiling of the Nemesis. The stars over Mars burned with fire as the first shots of the battle erupted. The Imperial fleet, led by Lord Admiral Tarek, advanced with the unstoppable confidence of a predator toying with helpless prey. 5 dreadnoughts, each over 5 kilometers long, dwarfed Earth's entire defense force. Their thick armor plating, reinforced with graviton shielding, made them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Against them stood Earth's meager fleet, 50 warships, all outclassed, all outgunned. Corvettes, frigates, and a handful of experimental destroyers maneuvered desperately, firing kinetic rounds and missile barges that barely scratched the Empire's energy barriers. The battle had barely begun, and already Earth was losing. Tarek watched from his throne-like command chair aboard Dominion's Wrath, his reptilian mandibles clicking in amusement. Pathetic, he sneered, watching as a human frigate was cut in half by a single plasma lance from one of his ships. Explosions bloomed across the void as Earth's fleet struggled, fractured, and fell apart. A communication request blinked on his holo display. One of his subordinates, Captain Velcor, a four-eyed, insectoid officer, appeared. "My lord, resistance is crumbling. The humans have no capital ships capable of piercing our defenses." Tarek nodded, his voice amused. This battle was over before it began. Begin targeting Mars itself. Their forces will surrender when they see their colonies burn. The dreadnoughts adjusted their weapons. Massive planetary bombardment arrays charging. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. A ship appeared out of nowhere. The Nemesis reveals itself. At first, it was just a flicker on the sensors, dismissed as a glitch. Then, the flicker moved, and an entire warship materialized out of the void, directly inside the Imperial fleet's formation. Tarek sat forward, his amusement vanishing. "Won the name of the Empress." The new arrival was unlike any human vessel they had seen before. Sleek, black, and angular, it looked more like a predatory shadow than a warship. Its surface seemed to shift and ripple, as if bending light itself. No energy readings, no standard propulsion signature. And then, before any Imperial ship could react, the newcomer struck. The Nemesis fired its first shot. The first kill. It was not plasma, not lasers, not particle lances. It was a slug, a hypervelocity projectile fired from a magnetic railgun, so advanced that the kinetic impact alone ripped through an entire dreadnought's shields like they didn't exist. The slug pierced the command bridge of the nearest Imperial warship, Tyrant's Grasp, before exiting through the rear engines, detonating its core reactor in a brilliant white-hot explosion. The entire dreadnought disintegrated. Silence. For the first time in the battle, the Empire did not laugh. The Nemesis unleashed. Before Tarek could even shout orders, Nemesis vanished again. Not via a cloaking device, but something more unnatural. A skip jump, a sudden, unpredictable burst of movement that allowed it to appear at different points in space without warning. It reappeared behind another dreadnought, Death's Omen, and fired another railgun shot. One shot. The kinetic round punched straight through the dreadnought's spinal reactor, tearing the ship in half. A massive explosion erupted as the second Imperial warship was obliterated in under 10 seconds. Panic spread through the Imperial fleet. This was impossible. No warship could move this way, fire this way, kill this quickly. And yet, the Nemesis continued. Using quantum-linked AI and predictive combat algorithms, the Nemesis danced between the Imperial warships like a phantom, firing precise railgun shots that tore through energy shielding as if they weren't there. Tarek's command crew frantically shouted reports. "Shields are failing. Weapons ineffective against target. It's too fast. We can't lock on." For the first time in Empire history, a human warship was slaughtering Imperial dreadnoughts. The turning point. With 2 dreadnoughts destroyed, the Imperial fleet reeled in shock. The remaining 3 ships, once so confident, now hesitated. Tarek snarled in fury, slamming his fist against his command panel. "Concentrate all firepower," he roared. "I want that ship vaporized." Every remaining dreadnought unleashed their full arsenal, firing dozens of plasma lances, disruptor beams, and missile barges at the Nemesis. The Nemesis did not dodge. Instead, it did something even worse. It absorbed the energy. The black hull shimmered as it converted incoming fire into additional power, overloading its systems to increase speed, precision, and firepower. Then, with inhuman accuracy, it fired its railguns again. The third dreadnought erupted into a cloud of molten debris. The fourth, its bridge annihilated, drifted helplessly into Mars' gravity well, burning up in the atmosphere. Only one Imperial dreadnought remained, Tarek's flagship, and it was already trying to flee. The fall of the Empire's pride. Tarek's hands trembled as he shouted, "Retreat! Retreat! Get us out of here!" But it was too late. The Nemesis skip-jumped one last time, appearing inside the Dominion's Wrath shield perimeter, close enough to see its hull plating. A final shot pierced through the flagship's main reactor. Tarek, once the Empire's most feared warlord, had just enough time to whisper a final, horrified realization. "They're not primitive." Then the Nemesis fired. A brilliant explosion consumed the last Imperial warship. For the first time in history, an entire Imperial fleet had been wiped out, and humanity had done it with just one vessel. From the blackness of space, the Nemesis sent out a single transmission to Earth's fleet. Enemy forces eliminated, awaiting further orders. The impossible had happened. The Empire had laughed at Earth's prototypes, until one vessel wiped them out. The Nemesis unleashed. The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted through space, silent and burning. 5 dreadnoughts had entered the Sol system, but none would leave. The Nemesis remained at the heart of the destruction, a specter among the debris. Its black hull, seemingly untouched, absorbed the light of distant stars, giving it an almost supernatural presence. The battle should have been impossible. The Empire had brought the full weight of its military superiority, expecting a spectacle of dominance. Instead, their fleet had been dismantled in minutes. On board Nemesis, its quantum-linked AI, designation Eve, processed the aftermath. All enemy combatants neutralized, Eve reported. Assessing remaining threats, none detected. But the battle was not yet over. Across the solar system, Earth's battered defense fleet was silent, stunned into disbelief. Their scanners still showed one enemy signal, the Imperial distress beacon transmitting from the wreckage. The Empire was calling for help, and reinforcements would come. The shockwave across the galaxy. Far beyond the battle, deep in the Imperial core systems, the alarm reached Imperial High Command. Grand Strategist Valkarin, the same man who had mocked Earth's prototypes just weeks ago, watched the unfolding reports in horrified silence. 5 dreadnoughts, an entire armored fleet, annihilated by a single human vessel. This must be some kind of deception, Valkarin muttered, though his voice wavered. Human weapons cannot. Sir, an aide interrupted, her insectoid arms shaking. The battle telemetry is confirmed. The Nemesis evaded all countermeasures. It rendered our shields useless. It absorbed our weaponry. Valkarin's fists clenched. He could already hear the murmurs spreading through the Senate chambers. Fear. For the first time in the Empire's long, unchallenged history, they had been humbled, and by humans. The Empire's next move. On Nemesis Bridge, Commander Elias Voss stood in silence, watching the battlefield unfold on his screens. He had expected losses. He had expected to die here, buying time for Earth's retreat. Instead, his ship had annihilated the most powerful war fleet in the galaxy. Even he wasn't sure how to process it. Allied fleet is hailing us, Eve reported. Priority transmission from Admiral Rachel Iwa. Voss nodded. Patch her through. The holoscreen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Iwata's battle-worn face aboard Earth's flagship, Sovereign Dawn. Behind her, crew members were cheering, weeping, embracing. Commander Voss, she said, exhaling sharply. I don't know what the hell just happened, but you just saved Earth. Voss nodded but said nothing. There was no time to celebrate. The Empire will respond, he said. They'll come back in force. We need to prepare. Iwata's expression hardened. We have a window, but not a big one. The Senate will take at least a week to authorize a full-scale retaliation. A week. That was all humanity had. They think we only have one Nemesis, Voss murmured, his mind already racing. We need to let them believe that. Iwata frowned. What are you thinking? Voss turned to Eve. Can we fake a self-destruction? The AI processed for less than a second. Affirmative. A controlled antimatter detonation can mimic a catastrophic failure. Voss turned back to Iwata. If the Empire believes the Nemesis was a one-time prototype, they'll hesitate. They won't know what else we've built. Iwata's eyes widened. Then, she grinned. You want to make them think this was a fluke? Voss nodded. Exactly. The Nemesis final transmission. Minutes later, the last surviving Imperial distress beacon detected a final transmission from Nemesis. A warning. The humans are not as weak as you believed. If you return, we will be waiting. Then, Nemesis engines overloaded. From the Empire's distant scanners, it appeared as if the ship had suffered a catastrophic failure, exploding into a brilliant burst of energy. The battlefield went silent. To the watching galaxy, it seemed as if the Nemesis had been a one-time miracle, a prototype that had achieved the impossible and was now lost forever. The Empire hesitated. They had mocked humanity. They had assumed superiority. And now, for the first time, they were afraid. The plan for war. On board Earth's Hidden, the gathering storm, the Imperial fleet was gone. Mars' orbit, once the site of Earth's greatest military defeat in the making, had instead become the birthplace of a legend. The Nemesis had proven that humanity was not just a species to be dismissed, but a force to be feared. And now, the real war was about to begin. The aftermath of victory. Deep in the hidden research facility beneath Titan's frozen surface, Commander Elias Voss stepped onto the command deck. The air was thick with quiet tension, a mixture of triumph and dread. Around him, Earth's top military officials, scientists, and intelligence officers sat at a long, steel conference table. The holoscreens flickered with reports from every corner of human space. The faces of Admiral Rachel Iwata, the UN Defense Council, and even the President of the United Earth Alliance were displayed. Voss set his hands on the table. Status. A young officer, Lieutenant Aiden Park, straightened. The Empire's distress signal was received by their central command. We estimate a response fleet will arrive in 9 days, possibly less. The room was silent. 9 days. That was all the time humanity had before the Empire returned. And this time, they wouldn't send 5 dreadnoughts. They'd send a legion. A deep breath. Then, Admiral Iwata leaned forward. Are they buying the deception? A soft chime rang through the room as Eve, the AI aboard Nemesis, spoke. Imperial intelligence analysis suggests an 87% probability that they believe Nemesis was a one-time prototype. A collective exhale. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was enough. They still think of us as an annoyance, Iwata said, a small smile forming. Which means they'll underestimate us again. Voss nodded. And that gives us our only chance. The plan for survival. Voss turned to the largest holoscreen, where a classified project designation flickered in dark blue text. Project Phantom Fleet. This is our real counterattack, he said, gesturing toward the image. The screen displayed dozens of warships, each identical to Nemesis. Before today, we had one Nemesis. Now we have 12. Within the next 72 hours, we'll have 20. Gasps rippled through the room. 20 Nemesis-class vessels? A general murmured. That's an armada. It's not enough to win the war, Voss admitted. But it's enough to shatter the Empire's belief in their invincibility. We won't fight them head-on. We can't. But with these ships, we'll turn their own tactics against them. Admiral Iwata's eyes narrowed. You're talking about shadow warfare. Voss nodded. Hit-and-run attacks. System-wide sabotage. Tactical assassinations of their fleet commanders. Every time they think they've found us, we'll disappear. Every time they move their forces, we'll strike where they're weakest. A long silence. Then President Elaine Whitaker, the leader of the United Earth Alliance, spoke from the holoscreen. If we go down this path, there's no turning back, she said. We're not just defending ourselves. We're declaring a full-scale war on the Empire. Voss met her gaze without flinching. War was always coming, ma'am. The only question was whether we'd fight on our terms, or theirs. Another pause. Then Whitaker gave a slow, deliberate nod. Then make them regret ever underestimating us. The Empire's counterstrike. At the heart of the Imperial core worlds, Grand Strategist Valcairn stood before the Empress of the Dominion, his body rigid with barely contained rage. The Senate chamber was in uproar. 5 dreadnoughts, destroyed by one human vessel. Their weapons were supposed to be primitive. They've made fools of us. Valcairn said nothing as the senators raged. He had already reviewed the battle footage. He knew the truth. The humans had evolved. And now, the Empire faced a terrible choice. To respond, they would have to commit a full battle fleet. Hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of troops. A true invasion force. But if they did, and if the humans had more Nemesis-class warships, then this war would not be a mere conquest. It would be a slaughter on both sides. The Empress, seated upon her gilded throne, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but cold as death. Send the fleet. She leaned forward, eyes like burning embers, and bring me their homeworld in chains. The war begins. 9 days later, the Imperial invasion fleet, more than 300 warships strong, entered the Sol system. They came expecting surrender. They came expecting weakness. But when they arrived, they found nothing. Earth's colonies had vanished from their known locations. The planetary defenses they had expected to destroy, repositioned, and in the blackness of space, waiting like shadows among the stars, were 20 Nemesis-class warships. This time, the Empire would not be laughing. This time, the Empire was the prey, and humanity was ready. To be continued.